Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's review, we are jumping in yet again to some IPAs. One of my absolute favorite, probably is my overall favorite style. Massive hophead. I have a lot of favorites. I think there's a few styles that vie for the top honor, but IPA would be in that illustrious group. Nonetheless, we've got what I expect is going to be a really fun IPA review today. Two completely different brewers. But they're brewing similar style IPAs in effect. The first is a beer brand where we have only reviewed their imperial stouts, and they are absolute masters of that style. We're talking Hubbard's Cave today. So I'm really excited to jump in and see what their IPA game is about. Today their IPA we've got is their Fresh V33 IPA. This one clocks in at 8.5% ABV. And it's brewed with a combination of Galaxy and Vic Secret hops. Hubbard's Cave is based out of Niles, Illinois. And then the second beer we've got today, I've done one or two beers from them prior, but again, it was an Imperial Stout. So yet again, another that I know makes really great Imperial Stouts, but I'm giving their IPAs a whirl. This is Three Magnets Brewing out of Olympia, Washington. This is their Sorry Not Sorry, and it's a West Coast style double dry hopped IPA, 7.1% ABV on this one, and it's got a blend of Centennial, Chinook, and Simcoe hops in it. And I will get to the label art and explain the meaning behind the name here when we get to the actual review on this one. But I'm really excited. I love IPAs. I always love trying new ones. These are a couple big ABV IPAs from brands that I know do great Imperial Stouts. So I'm really, really excited to jump in and see what their IPAs are all about. So we're going to do exactly that. Starting with the Hubbard's Cave Fresh V33. This one clocks in at 8.5% ABV. Okay, so jumping right in, we are starting with Hubbard's Cave Fresh V33 IPA. Again, 8.5% ABV. This is brewed with a blend of Galaxy and Vic Secret hops, and they are based out of Niles, Illinois. Now, Hubbard's Cave we know well as an absolute master of Imperial Stouts. I would say they are among the top brewers that I could think of, certainly in the United States, that's making Imperial Stouts currently. Everyone I've had has been just absolute bang on. And I see why people are raving about them. I always try to get my hands on as many beers that they put out that I can, because I have yet to have one that's been less than stellar. So I'm very excited to jump in and see if they can pull the same thing off with their IPAs. At 8.5% and some big hops, I'm rather hopeful, I'll be honest. So let's get this cracked and poured right in. We are using, once again, our Sam Adams glass, which is a great all-round glass for many, many different beer styles due to its shape. And I find it works particularly well with IPAs. Really helps the aromas pop out of the glass. All right. Now, you may have noticed when I was pouring, and certainly you may have noticed now that it's in the glass. While it doesn't bill itself as such, this is indeed a New England style hazy. I know probably many of you, oh, what are you doing? You're always, no, I'm not. I don't hate on any beer or any beer style. I have a preference. I'm not a beer snob, I'm a connoisseur. My personal preference and reason for liking standard IPAs versus the New England style is multifaceted, and I'm going to get into that in a side series that I'm doing when I get more into styles and get a little more just background beer knowledge out. But we'll get to that. Nonetheless, for the style, it is absolutely lovely. You could say this looks like the classic quintessential New England style hazy. It pretty much looks like a glass of juice, a glass of orange juice, some kind of fruit juice. It is lovely. This is exactly what it's supposed to look like, and it is a beautiful, absolutely beautiful example. Had formed pretty well. It wasn't as effervescent, and the New England styles can kind of run the gamut of how they pour. Some can get a bigger head than others. This one, I did a pretty good pour and I gave it a good bit of agitation down the middle, but they tend to be a bit thicker than the average IPA, so they don't always form as lush and creamy of a head. Now, I've never had a New England style off of a tap. I would presume off of a tap it would still create a beautiful lush head. It's just how you pour it home. Kind of luck of the draw. But nonetheless, looks great. Let's give it a sniff. That smells absolutely fantastic. It's got a very pronounced hop aroma, and it smells fresh and bright and hoppy and fruity all at the same time. You can really smell the hops, and you can really smell that kind of classic juicy flavor that the New England and hazy style IPAs bring to the table. It's quite a bit different than your average IPA. Standard IPAs are all about hop pungency and astringency, and certainly some of them impart flavors of fruit, but they don't impart that kind of juicy quality. That's kind of the big draw to these IPAs. For people that are just getting into beer or just getting into IPAs, many, if not most, of the standard IPA offerings, at least American craft brewed IPA offerings, they're so intense and intensely hoppy that they can put a lot of people off that would otherwise never approach the style. When you add in the lactose, which sweetens it up, it accentuates those kind of fruity elements, and it takes some of the edge out of the hops in the bitter. When I say some, I mean a lot, typically. It's one of the reasons that I don't typically go for them by default, because I'm a massive hop head and I am all about the bitters and the alpha acids and the lupulin content. I want to be punched in the teeth with bitter. It's an acquired taste. You either love it or hate it, and it takes time for most people to really get in and appreciate that flavor sensation. It's so astringently bitter. But these are a completely different animal altogether. These are very, very approachable. So let's jump in and see what this one's about. Okay, this is a very, very, very nice New England style hazy IPA, and I'll tell you, it's not like the average. This still has a very clear, very upfront hop presence. It's got enough sweetness that some of those fruity, kind of juicy qualities do come out, but it doesn't at all override the actual hops and the hop bitters and the alphas and the lupulin in the hop naturally. This is still very much a hop forward, a hop centric, and bitter forward IPA. This is an interesting one for the style for me. The majority are not like this. They tend to add more lactose and accentuate the kind of juice and fruit side of the hop, which starts to overpower the bittering agents. This was balanced in such a way that the bitters and the hop are still the shining star of the beer. It just brings out some of those natural fruity and juicy qualities without killing the bitters. So this is an interesting textbook example of just how vastly different all IPAs and IPA styles can be. It's still a massively, massively varied landscape, and they don't all have to be cookie cutter. I appreciate what Hubbard's Cave is doing here, and I must say, for me personally, I'm pleasantly surprised. Maybe the average New England style drinker wouldn't like it as well, unless they also happen to like really hoppy IPAs, because this is certainly hop dominant. It's very bitter forward. Make no mistake about that. I'm going to jump in another sip and explore the body and mouthfeel and finish. The body is medium heavy to heavy. 8.5%, you might expect that. The mouthfeel is very smooth. It's very creamy. I don't want to say it's lush creamy like cream ale creamy or nitro tap stout creamy, but it's got this creamy quality mixed with a natural viscosity. It's a thick beer in the mouth. 8.5%, I didn't expect any less, especially as a hazy style. They tend to be a bit thicker and creamier in the mouth. There's just more substance mouthfeel-wise to the beer. This is no exception. I wouldn't say it's silky, but the viscosity in tandem with the creamy edge it does have does make it feel that way in the mouth. When you first get it in your palate, first thing you taste is juice. It does taste very juicy. Almost reminds me of a combination of maybe a mix of orange and pineapple juice. And that lasts for all of about a second, second and a half. And then the hops open up completely. It's all hop. The bitters start to intensify and intensify and intensify. and they start melding with that juicy quality until the ratio goes even, and then it flip-flops and it's hops completely on top and the kind of juicy quality completely on the bottom. And it just gets progressively more bitter, and you start to taste more and more of the hop character come through. Galaxy is a very strong hop. Now, admittedly, I don't know that much about Vic's Secret as a hop strain. I'm going to do some homework and I'll put some comments on this video. But Galaxy is a very big, well-known high alpha acid hop that does have a very pronounced flavor, aroma, and a lot of bitters that come through. And they're really coming through in this beer. This is great. I absolutely love it. I didn't anticipate enjoying this as much, but I'm glad that I got to try it. And my gut reaction before I go through and even get my scores is my thoughts on Hubbard's Cave brewing IPAs as well as they do Imperial Stouts. That's a big yes for me. I'm a fan. I'm going to take my time sipping on this, count my scores. When we come back, we will get to the three magnets. Sorry, not sorry. That one's 7.1% ABV. Okay, moving on to beer number 2 of today's IPA review. We have got Three Magnets Brewing. This is their Sorry Not Sorry. It's a West Coast style double dry hopped IPA, clocking in at 7.1% ABV. This one's brewed with Centennial, Chinook, and Simcoe hops, and they are based out of Olympia, Washington. Now, can art. For those of you that are younger, you may not even understand the reference here. Sorry is a board game. Back in the day before video games, games we played came in boxes with little pieces, and they were literally manual, sometimes with a pen and pencil, but there was a game called Sorry, and that's what the pieces looked like. And actually the script on this label matches the font that they used on the game itself, so it's pretty cool. Another thing I can tell you about this beer. Up here, Sorry is made by the game company Hasbro, but on this one it says No Hasbro Gaming. And underneath Three Magnets Brewing Company it says presents a clear IPA. Sorry, not sorry. So their nod is it's not hazy, it's not part of the haze craze, it's a standard IPA, and they've double dry hopped it. So it's going to be a nice clear, big hop forward, hop dominant IPA. And based on their hop choices, I imagine that will be true. Centennial, Chinook, and Simcoe, all very well known as high alpha acid content hop strains. So I'm expecting a lot of alpha acids, a lot of bittering, and a lot of hop dominance. So this will be in stark contrast to the Hubbard's Cave. Though New England Hazy, it was very hop forward. So I'm interested to see how these two compare and contrast to one another. But nonetheless, I'm a big fan. I'm not a hater, but it amuses me because there's so many New England and hazies and juicy this and smoothie that. Having a new, just standard IPA that's all about the hop, I'm a massive fan. So let's jump in and see what this one's about. Let's get this poured straight in the glass. All right. It's about halfway. Give it a little agitation here. Yeah, that formed a nice head. That'll be settling for a hot minute. Okay. Visually, this is exactly what I picture in my head when I think of an IPA. This is the color in appearance. It's very, very effervescent, very, very active. It's got predominantly what looks like a mix of very tiny, very, very tiny, small, fine bubbles and some medium ones. And it's very, very effervescent indeed. It is certainly part of the reason that this head formed so well. Though I can tell you it's already collapsing pretty quickly. It's just so active. The head's going to hold okay, but it's really, really going to reduce. I expect to see a good bit of retention and cling on the sides, but the actual fluffy, creamy, lush pillow on top is going to dissipate reasonably quickly just because it's so effervescent. It's a very, very active beer. And the head being this thick, I'm going to see if I can actually smell this one through this thick, dense foam. The answer is yes. Yes, I can. This smells very hop forward, very hop dominant. And you get a good mix of a citrus aroma and an earthy hop aroma. Based on their hop choices, I'm not surprised by that. Now, Simcoe can often impart some pine, some tar and resin, both in aroma and flavor, But I can tell you, in the aroma, I'm not picking it up at all. I'm getting very much citrus, and it's a mix of citrus and kind of tropical fruit, maybe papaya, mango, kind of mixed with grapefruit and orange, maybe just a touch of lemon, no lime, and there's a nice earthy hop back behind it as well. The citrus and the tropical fruit kind of aroma profiles are the most dominant in the nose, and the earthy hop is kind of secondary behind that. Well, really tertiary, since we're talking about 3 different aspects, but it smells great. It smells absolutely great. It smells like a classic IPA, nice, open, big hop aromas, and I'm kind of expecting that it's going to have a pretty big hop kick given the varieties that they threw in. And yeah, the head's dissipated now. The carbonation fur has settled down a bit, so I think it's going to have pretty good retention from this point, and it looks pretty good to jump right in, so let's do it. Okay, that's very nice. Now, as a standard IPA, if I'm comparing this to the Hubbard Scave I just had, this is nowhere near the level of hop intensity and bitter intensity in terms of flavor profile that I got from the Hubbard Scave. That may have been a hazy, and this may be a clear classic IPA, but I think what they did with the hops here was make a milder, more balanced IPA, but their double dry hopping is what added this just absolute abundance of hop aroma. I think they're going for more aromatics here than hop bitterness in the flavor profile. So although these are high alpha acid hops, they didn't go insane with the amount that they used in the boil. So there's not as many alpha acids that actually made it into the beer and into the finished product. So this is a very clean, very light, very bright, refreshing IPA. It's not pungently bitter. This is an IPA I would recommend to anybody that's just getting into IPAs. And I think it's an interesting case example just based on so many facets. It's a standard, it's been double dry hopped, it's got 3 big alpha acid containing hops in it, but it's very mild. It's very mild. It's got bitters, sure, it does. It's an IPA, they always will, but it's very mild. This is a very approachable IPA to anybody that's just getting into the beer style, that maybe hasn't fully developed an appreciation for the flavor sensation of bitter. It's one of the more polarizing flavors, bitter and sour. That would be the 2 big ones for sure. A lot of people hate sour beers because they're sour. A lot of people hate IPAs because they're bitter. This is a very tame version that's just full of life. And it really is a story about the flavor complexity without the bitter sensation and the aroma. I mean, it just smells absolutely heavenly. It smells so juicy and fruity, much like you would get from a New England style hazy, but the bitters just didn't come through in an overabundance. They used it as flavorant and they used it as aroma without getting all the alpha acids extracted into the beer. It's very, very nice. I'm a massive hophead. You know I'm all about the bitters, but I can appreciate the subtleties in different IPA styles and different approaches, and this is very, very well done indeed. Let me jump in another sip for body mouthfeel finish. It's so bright and juicy and fruity. It really does, and it almost has this slight acidity, a slight tartness to it, which I never expect in an IPA, but it really does taste fruity. It's very fruit forward. Body is actually only medium. I don't even think it encroaches on medium heavy. It's medium, which is certainly lower than I anticipated at a 7.1% ABV. I expected it to be a bit more robust. The mouthfeel, it's got a little more viscosity to it than, say, that of water or fruit juice, but not by much. It's quite smooth. I wouldn't say it's creamy, but it's quite smooth in the mouth. It's got a very smooth mouthfeel, and that little bit of viscosity does help it stick around, but the finish really isn't super long. After that last sip, I'm left with that lingering tang and fruity kind of back to it. There's no real sense of hop bitterness other than what you first get in that first mouthful up front. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to top this off just a tick. I won't get the whole can in here. This is a pint, and this glass only holds roughly 12 ounces, and you never fill it up that way because the concave and convex shape, the tulip up top. But let's jump in and see how this finish actually develops across the life of each sip. First in your mouth, bright, immediate bright, pungent fruit, a little bit of tang. There's actually a little bit of hop funk that made it into the beer. Big alpha acid hops often do that. There's specific strains. They didn't use Mosaic, but that's one that's got a naturally funky flavor. It's a really unique and interesting hop in terms of aroma and in flavor profile, but it's one of the more funky ones. Simcoe in abundance can also impart some funk. I've brewed with all of these hop varieties. Some tend, if you get more volume in, to be a bit more funky than others. Though I have only dry hopped a handful of times because I really want to extract alpha acids. So I put my hops into the boil in various amounts at the very beginning, in the mid, and at the end, and then I'll dry hop occasionally. But I like the bitters. I like to make it as pungently bitter as possible. That's just how I brew for myself. That's what I like. But you can still get that funk just based on volume, even if it comes from dry hopping, just the natural qualities of the hop itself. So this tastes like an interesting mix of very bright, light, refreshing citrus and bright and rich tropical fruit. And then it's got this funkiness. It's like Brettanomyces light. If you've had a lot of Brettanomyces beers or a lot of the funky wild ales, sours, saisons, farmhouse ales, whatever, anything that's been brewed with a wild strain, Brettanomyces being the most well-known, that kind of funkiness, that kind of barnyard, that kind of gym sock, it's hard to describe what I mean by funk in a beer. You kind of have to experience it. Some people find it very, very off-putting. Others, like I'm a big fan, and anybody else that stands with me on that pedestal, bravo to you. It's an acquired taste, just as with everything. But this is a really nice beer. It's very interesting. It's so bright, and it's so fresh. It just bursts with brightness in your mouth, and it makes it feel significantly lighter than this beer is. This is a 7.1% ABV. This is kind of in the high-mid territory for a standard IPA. It's not a light beer, but all the qualities of this beer scream light to me. It's very refreshing. There's just this slight tartness to it that just brightens everything up and accentuates those citrus and those tropical fruit flavors. You just get that twinge of funk on the back. And that's what marries with the bitters, and it's very subtle. In fact, indeed, I have had many a session IPA that were far more bitter forward than this. This is a juicy, double dry hopped standard IPA, and I absolutely love it. Folks, I'm going to take my time, sip on this, count my scores. This is an interesting one. It's going to take me a hot minute, but when we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these IPAs, we're going to go through and get them ranked, starting with the Hubbard's Cave. This is the Fresh V33 IPA, 8.5%. This one's brewed with a blend of Galaxy and Vic Secret hops, and they are based out of Niles, Illinois. For the aroma on this one, the aroma was certainly above average, and I got a really good sense of what I might get in the beer. The hop aroma came through pretty strongly, though it wasn't ridiculously pungent. It gets an 8 out of 10. The taste on this, absolutely didn't expect this being a hazy, but the flavor was just massive. It was very hoppy, it was very fruity, but the bitters did not get drowned out at all. This was an IPA, hazy or not, that was all about the hop and letting the alpha acid content shine through. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Body on this. This was a medium heavy, bordering on heavy body. At 8.5%, I can't say I was surprised, but it was perfect for the ABV range. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel on this one. It was a very nice mouthfeel. Overall, it was pretty creamy, and it had this nice viscosity to it, certainly due to the ABV and this nice creamy nature, but there was a bit of effervescence in this that kept the mouthfeel from being kind of silky. It was still really nice, very, very high end. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Finish on this one. Very, very long finish. You could keep tasting the hops, all of the elements that they brought to the table, the malt bill, and the bitters that just lingered and lingered and lingered and kept pushing out the length of this finish. It really stuck with you after each sip. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Head and retention. It formed a decent head, and the retention was okay, but it was mostly in the form of clinging to the sides of the glass. It was a bit too active in terms of carbonation to let that head retain. Even though it did form more or less, there were too many bubbles of larger size, and that carbonation just kept coming up and kind of destroying the head that it created. It was still on the high end of average. I gave it a 6. Appearance-wise, this was a textbook New England style hazy IPA. It looked like a glass of orange juice, and that's kind of the prototypical appearance. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Balance on this. This was exactly how I wish all hazy New England style IPAs were balanced, because it didn't just let the fruity characteristics and aspects of the hops come through. It let the bitters come through. It let the aromas come through. Everything about this beer was all about the balance, but nothing drowned out that classic hop character of the bitters. It really came through in abundance, and I wish they were all this way. This gets a perfect 10 out of 10 for my money. Feeling in the intangible. I didn't actually expect to enjoy this beer as well as I did. I was really surprised at how it actually came out when you finally got into the beer itself. The aroma, I didn't expect it to taste as it did. And all of the aroma came through in the flavor, but the bitterness, natural bitterness of these high alpha acid hops still came through. They did not get drowned out. It was hop dominant. It was bitter dominant. It was still a true IPA at its heart. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10 from me subjectively. Finally, as an example of this style. New England IPAs kind of run the gamut. Some are sweet, some are all about the juice, all about the fruitiness, and accentuating those aspects of the hop. This did it all in abundance, but it still let the classic, true bitterness character of an India Pale Ale shine through, and I think that this is one of the best representatives of the style for my money. It isn't overtly sweet. It isn't one that's so bitter that the kind of juicy and fruity characteristics don't get to shine through for the style. I think it did all aspects of it perfectly and in perfect harmony, and this is really what I wish I would get out of every hazy. For me, it gets a perfect 10 out of 10. That brings the total score on Hubbard Escape Fresh V33 to a 93 out of 100. So certainly well above average, and this is one I encourage anybody that's a fan of hoppy IPAs and hazy New England style IPAs alike. I think this is one worth your attention, worth trying just to see what you think. Moving on to Three Magnets. This is their Sorry Not Sorry West Coast style double dry hopped IPA, 7.1% ABV, brewed with a combination of Centennial, Chinook, and Simcoe hops. They're based out of Olympia, Washington. Now, both of these brewers I know from their stellar Imperial Stouts, so I was very excited to try their IPA offerings. Hubbard's Cave did not disappoint. Moving on to Three Magnets. The aroma on this one was nice. It wasn't super pungent. You could smell it, and you could smell that it had a hop character, and you could kind of smell the fruity character to the hops as well, but it didn't jump out at me out of the glass. I gave it a high end of average. I gave it a 6. For the taste, very flavorful. Make no mistake about that. This was a good tasting beer. But if you're going to make a West Coast style and double dry hop it on top of using high alpha acid content hops, I do expect a boatload of bitters to come through in the flavor profile, and it just didn't. This was really a clear version of a New England style IPA for me. Really the only thing that separated it was the clarity of the beer. But this beer was not a story of high alpha acid content hops, which it had. This was really a story of dry hopping and kind of clearing up what is otherwise kind of a New England style IPA. And if you're going to call it a West style and then double dry hop it, I am really shocked that they didn't put more alpha acids in the base beer to come through, and that it didn't have as bitter of a presence I expected. For me, although it was a good beer and I enjoyed it, you can't call it a West Coast style and not have the bitters. That is the hallmark of the West Coast style. It's the big high alpha acid hops that make it into the finished product. This for me just gets an average rating for the taste. It gets a 5. Moving on to the body. For 7.1% ABV, I did expect it to be more robust than it was. It was just medium. For me, that just gets the high end of average. It gets a 6. Mouthfeel on this one. Mouthfeel on this was nice. It was creamy and it had a little viscosity, but again, for 7.1 ABV, I expected there to be more substance to the viscous quality of the mouthfeel, and I expected that to impart itself into the creamy nature. And it had a little base, but it wasn't high end. It was above average though. I give it an 8 out of 10. For the finish on this beer, it was enjoyable. The flavors that I was able to experience were enjoyable. Again, please don't mistake this as criticism, but I have to be true and I can't be subjective except for in one category. And for me, the finish just didn't have the longevity. It didn't have enough alpha acids to let the bitters come through and extend out the finish. It was just average in that respect. It gets a 5. Head and retention. Head and retention on this one was absolute slam dunk perfection. It could have come off of a tap. It was just as lush and thick and creamy as could be. It does get a perfect 10 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was just a stellar picture perfect IPA. It was the right color that I picture in my brain, and it was beautiful and clear as they dictated on their label. It gets a 10 out of 10. Balance on this one. The balance is one of the categories where I was a little disappointed. You're going to call yourself West Coast style, and you're going to double dry hop it and use those high alpha acid contents. And yes, the fruit came through, and that slight tang and that slight tartness, and that kind of helped to accentuate the fruity qualities of the beer, but I was absolutely missing the bitters. Entirely, I was missing the bitters. There was only a slight hint, and it was so subtle. It was far weaker than your average even session IPA, standard session, and for me, it just didn't do it. The balance was wrong. It needed far more bitters to be present, far more hop bitter characteristic to be present to make itself a West Coast style IPA. It just didn't deliver. It gets a 5 out of 10 for me. Feeling in the intangible. While subjectively I did really enjoy this beer, in the back of my brain I just kept thinking where it fell flat. And frankly, as an IPA and a West Coast style IPA, it fell flat in the bitters department. It did not have enough bitters at all. The alpha acid didn't make it through into the finished product, and it affected multiple categories for the beer style. For me, I was generous. I gave it the high end of average because I did enjoy the beer. I gave it a 6. Finally, as an example of the style. I'm sorry, but a West Coast style IPA is the most intense, the most hop pungent, the most bitter forward subgenre of all IPA categories. This did not deliver there. It was a truly spectacularly delicious and enjoyable beer, but it was not bitter forward. It did not deliver on the alpha acids to boost the IBUs up, perceptible or otherwise. And for me, again, it just gets another average rating. It gets a 5. So that brings the total score on the 3 magnet Sorry Not Sorry to a 66 out of 100. So we're looking at a pretty large score gap here, 27 points total. That's a pretty big difference between them. And while I did enjoy both beers, absolutely Hubbard's Cave deserved the 93, and I think it is by a landslide the superior offering of the two. Even though this wasn't even brewing a standard IPA, it did it better than the 3 magnets offering. So I was not disappointed personally in either beer, but objectively speaking, I have to rate in the categories how they present themselves, and Hubbard's did win by a landslide. So ladies and gentlemen, this was 2 completely different IPA styles by 2 brewers that I know by doing wonderful imperial stouts, and I was really excited to jump in and see what their IPA offerings were all about, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. As always, I sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. All of the above help us, and they help us keep our content in your feed. If you want to keep in the loop when our videos go live, just click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.